Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy my video, please click the like button and share the video. It is the only way the YouTube algorithms really notices me. I will be very grateful to you. Midnight Brings Malevolent Forces. Scary story, published by Scare Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Arrival. We rolled into the town of Hollow's End, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows over the deserted streets. The air felt thick with an unsettling stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through the overgrown weeds that choked the sidewalks. Our SUV's headlights cut through the gathering gloom, illuminating the crumbling facades of abandoned buildings and revealing the skeletal remains of what must have once been a bustling town. "Is this really the place?" Sam asked from the passenger seat, his voice tinged with doubt. He leaned forward, peering through the windshield. "It looks like a ghost town." "Is," replied Katie from the back seat, her voice barely above a whisper. She was the one who had insisted on this trip, driven by some inexplicable fascination with the town's dark past. Hollow's End was abandoned after a series of mysterious disappearances back in the 1960 ES. No one's lived here since. Beside her, Jake shifted uncomfortably, his fingers drumming nervously on his knee. Great, a weekend getaway in a haunted town. Just what I needed. We parked in front of what appeared to be the old town hall, its once grand structure now reduced to a dilapidated shell. As we stepped out of the car, a cold breeze sent shivers down my spine. The air smelled of decay and something else. I couldn't quite place, a faint, acrid odor that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Let's find the place we're staying at," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The sooner we settle in, the sooner we can figure out what we want to explore." The house we had rented for the weekend stood at the edge of town, its windows dark and empty like soulless eyes. The front door creaked ominously as we pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior filled with cobwebs and forgotten memories. The floorboards groaned under our weight, and every step seemed to echo in the oppressive silence. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Sam muttered, glancing over his shoulder. Katie shrugged, though her eyes darted nervously around the room. "It's just your imagination." But it wasn't just Sam. I felt it too, the prickling sensation of unseen eyes tracking our every move. As we unpacked our bags, the shadows seemed to deepen, and the house settled around us with unsettling creaks and groans. That night, as we gathered around the fireplace, the first hints of the supernatural began to reveal themselves. It started with the whispers faint, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. Katie stiffened, her eyes wide with alarm. "Did you hear that?" Jake laughed nervously. "Hear what?" A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision, and I turned just in time to catch a glimpse of someone slipping into the darkness. My heart pounded, and I forced a smile, trying to shake off the unease. "Nothing," I said, though my voice betrayed my fear. "It's probably just the wind." But deep down, we all knew it wasn't just the wind. Hollow's End had secrets, and we were about to uncover them, whether we wanted to or not. Chapter 2. The Discovery. The morning after our unsettling first night in Hollow's End, the town seemed almost peaceful under the bright sun. Almost. We decided to explore, hoping daylight would dispel some of the lingering unease from the previous night. "Let's split up and see what we can find," Katie suggested, her curiosity undiminished by the previous night's events. "We'll cover more ground that way." Jake, still skeptical, rolled his eyes. "Just remember, if something jumps out at you, it's probably just the wind," he said, mocking my own attempt to calm us the night before. We laughed nervously and set off in different directions. Sam and I headed towards the heart of the town, while Katie and Jake veered off towards the outskirts. The air was still heavy with an unshakable sense of abandonment. Every silent street and boarded-up window, a reminder of the town's eerie history. After an hour of aimless wandering, we regrouped near an old ivy-covered mansion at the town's edge. Its towering structure loomed ominously, casting long shadows over us. The front gate, rusty and crooked, creaked open with a sinister invitation. "This must be the place," Sam said, his voice barely a whisper. A local, an old man with weathered features, appeared out of nowhere, startling us. "You don't want to go in there," he warned, his voice gravelly with age. "That house, it's cursed. Everyone who enters regrets it." Katie's eyes lit up with a mix of fear and excitement. "Thanks for the warning," she said, but we all knew it only fueled her determination. We pushed open the heavy front door, and a cloud of dust enveloped us. Inside, the mansion was a labyrinth of decay, every corner hiding a new shadow. As we explored, Katie's sharp eyes caught sight of something odd, a small door, almost hidden behind a tattered curtain. "Look at this," she called out, pushing the door open to reveal a hidden room. The air inside was different, colder, and charged with a strange energy. The walls were covered in cryptic symbols, and in the center of the room sat an old, leather-bound journal. "What do you think it says?" Jake asked, peering over her shoulder. Katie opened the journal, and her face paled as she read aloud. "It's a diary. It talks about dark rituals and summoning malevolent forces to protect the town. But something went wrong. Very wrong." Just as she finished, a sudden chill swept through the room. The atmosphere grew heavy, oppressive. At the stroke of midnight, the house seemed to come alive with a terrifying force. Shadows twisted into grotesque shapes, and the whispers from the night before returned, louder and more menacing. Suddenly, a violent force threw Sam across the room, pinning him to the wall. His screams filled the air as invisible hands seemed to choke the life out of him. We scrambled to help, but a ghostly figure emerged from the darkness, its eyes burning with malevolence. Katie screamed, clutching the journal to her chest. "We need to leave, now." We bolted from the mansion, the specter's fury chasing us into the night. As we regrouped outside, panting and shaken, the realization hit us hard. The malevolent forces were real, and we had just awakened them. Hollow's End had claimed its first victim, and we were next in line. Chapter 3: Unraveling the Past. We burst out of the mansion, gasping for breath, hearts pounding. Sam collapsed onto the ground, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. We gathered around him, trying to calm him down, but his gaze remained fixed on the mansion, as if expecting the malevolent force to follow. "We need answers," Katie said, clutching the old journal tightly. "We can't just run blindly. We need to know what we're dealing with." We retreated to our rented house, its dilapidated walls offering a false sense of security. As we sat around the kitchen table, Katie began to read from the journal, her voice steady despite the fear that lingered in the room. "It says here that in the late 1800s, the town's founders conducted a ritual to protect Hollow's End from outsiders and natural disasters. They called upon dark forces, but they couldn't control what they summoned. The forces turned against them, leading to a series of tragic events." Jake frowned, rubbing his temples. "So, they cursed their own town. Brilliant." Katie nodded. "They tried to reverse the curse, but it was too late. The malevolent forces had taken hold, and the town was abandoned after too many people disappeared. As the truth sank in, we realized how deeply we were entangled in the town's dark past." The journal mentioned names and events that seemed eerily familiar. Sam's ancestor, Thomas Baines, was one of the original settlers. The discovery hit him hard, reopening old wounds of a family history steeped in tragedy. "My grandmother always told stories about a cursed town," Sam murmured, his voice shaky. "I thought they were just old wives' tales. I never imagined." The more we read, the more connections we found. Jake's family had once lived in Hollow's End, but had left after a series of unexplained incidents. Katie's fascination with the town stemmed from her own family's legends. My own nightmares, which had plagued me since childhood, suddenly made sense as I recognized scenes described in the journal. As night fell, the atmosphere grew heavy with dread. The supernatural events began to escalate. The whispers we'd heard before grew louder, almost deafening. Objects moved on their own, and shadows twisted unnaturally. At midnight, a mirror shattered, sending shards flying across the room. The walls groaned, as if the house itself were alive. Sam clutched his head, screaming as an unseen force seemed to attack him from within. "We have to find a way to stop this," I said, my voice barely audible over the chaos. "We can't just sit here and wait to be picked off one by one." Katie's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded resolutely. "The journal mentions a counter-ritual. It's risky, but it might be our only chance." As we huddled together, the reality of our situation became starkly clear. The malevolent forces were growing stronger, and our time was running out. We had to act fast, or we'd become just another tragic story in the cursed history of Hollow's End. Chapter 4. The Haunting. Following night, the atmosphere in the house was electric with fear and tension. Every creak and groan of the old building set us on edge, our nerves frayed from the relentless whispers and shadowy figures that now haunted our every moment. "We have to figure out the counter-ritual," Katie insisted, flipping through the journal's brittle pages. "It's our only chance." Sam, still pale and shaking from the previous night's attack, snapped. "You think I don't know that? But how are we supposed to perform a ritual we barely understand?" Jake, who had been pacing the room, slammed his fist on the table. "Enough. Arguing won't help us. We need to stay focused." The malevolent forces didn't give us a moment's respite. As if sensing our despair, they escalated their attacks. Doors slammed shut on their own, locking us in rooms. Cold, invisible hands brushed against our skin, leaving icy trails of fear. The walls whispered our names, each syllable dripping with malice. At one point, a violent force threw Katie across the room, her scream piercing the oppressive silence. She hit the wall with a sickening thud, and we rushed to her side, fear gripping us tighter with every second. "Are you okay?" I asked, helping her to her feet. Katie nodded, wincing in pain. "We can't let them break us. That's what they want." But the strain was taking its toll. Sam's fear morphed into paranoia. He accused Jake of not taking the situation seriously enough, and Jake fired back, accusing Sam of being too weak to handle the pressure. The arguments grew more heated, revealing old wounds and buried resentments. "You've always been a coward, Sam," Jake shouted, his face flushed with anger. "This isn't about the town. It's about you being too scared to face reality." Sam's eyes blazed with fury. "At least I'm not pretending this is some kind of game." "People's lives are at stake, Jake." Their words cut deep, and I realized the malevolent forces were exploiting our fears and insecurities, turning us against each other. It was a psychological torment as much as a physical one. In the midst of our turmoil, Katie found a crucial clue in the journal. "Listen to this," she said, her voice shaking. "It says that the original settlers used a specific artifact to bind the forces. We need to find it and use it in the counter-ritual." The artifact was described as an old amulet, buried somewhere in the town. Its location was tied to the history of the town and the personal stories of its settlers. As we pieced together the clues, it became clear that the amulet was hidden in the town cemetery, the resting place of the original settlers. "We need to go there," I said, my voice firm despite the fear gnawing at my insides. "Tonight." The thought of venturing into the cemetery at midnight filled us with dread, but we knew it was our only hope. The malevolent forces were growing stronger, and our time was running out. We had to act, or we'd become another tragic chapter in Hollow's End's cursed history. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. The moon hung low in the sky as we gathered our courage and supplies for the confrontation. Armed with flashlights, the journal, and a hastily drawn map of the town cemetery, we set out, our hearts pounding in unison with each step we took toward the graveyard. Katie had spent the afternoon deciphering the journal's instructions, while Jake and I scoured the town for anything that could help salt, iron tools, and even a few old relics we found in the town's small museum. Sam, still visibly shaken, had reluctantly joined our efforts, his fear palpable. "We need to be ready for anything," Katie reminded us as we approached the rusted gates of the cemetery. "The journal says the amulet is buried with the founder, Thomas Baines, in an unmarked grave near the oldest section." The cemetery was a sprawling labyrinth of crumbling tombstones and twisted trees. Fog rolled in, shrouding the graves in a ghostly veil. The air was thick with a chilling presence, as if the spirits of the town were watching, waiting. As we ventured deeper, the temperature plummeted. Our breaths formed clouds in the frigid air, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the crunch of gravel underfoot. We found the oldest section, marked by a circle of ancient, moss-covered stones. "This is it," Katie said, consulting the journal one last time. "Start digging." With shaking hands, we began to dig, the ground cold and unyielding. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, our shovels hit something solid. We uncovered a small wooden box, aged and fragile. Inside, nestled in decaying cloth, lay the amulet, a tarnished silver piece, its surface etched with intricate symbols. "We have it," Sam whispered, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Suddenly, the wind picked up, howling through the trees. The ground beneath us trembled, and a low, guttural growl echoed from the darkness. Shadows writhed, forming into grotesque shapes as the malevolent forces materialized. "We need to perform the ritual now," Katie yelled, clutching the amulet. She began chanting the incantation from the journal, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around us. But the forces fought back fiercely. An invisible force knocked Jake to the ground, his scream piercing the night. I rushed to help him, but something cold and powerful grabbed me, lifting me off my feet and slamming me into a tombstone. Sam tried to protect Katie, but the malevolent spirits overwhelmed him, dragging him into the darkness. Katie's chanting faltered as she watched in horror. The amulet glowed faintly, but it wasn't enough. "We're losing," she screamed, her voice breaking. In a desperate bid, I crawled toward the amulet, my vision blurring. As I reached out, a shadowy figure materialized, its eyes burning with malevolence. It spoke in a voice that resonated with ancient malice. "You cannot win. This town is ours." The amulet's light flickered, and the ground opened beneath us, swallowing the amulet and plunging us into darkness. Pain seared through me as I fell, the last thing I heard being Katie's desperate cries and the malevolent laughter of the spirits. When I awoke, the cemetery was silent once more. The amulet was gone, and so was Sam. We had failed, and the realization hit us like a sledgehammer. The malevolent forces were stronger than ever, and we were left broken and defeated. Hollow's End had claimed another victim, and the nightmare was far from over. Chapter 6: Descent into Madness. The morning after our failed confrontation, the town of Hollow's End seemed to mock us with its eerie calm. The malevolent forces had withdrawn, but their presence lingered, an oppressive weight that hung in the air and pressed down on our minds. We stumbled back to our rented house, our spirits shattered. Katie was in shock, her eyes hollow and distant as she replayed the previous night's events in her mind. Jake's hands trembled uncontrollably, and I could see the beginnings of a dangerous paranoia in his eyes. As for me, the pain from my injuries was nothing compared to the growing sense of dread gnawing at my sanity. "We need to regroup," I said, though my voice sounded weak and unconvincing. "We can't let them win." Katie's voice was barely a whisper. "We already lost, didn't we? Sam is gone. The amulet. It's lost." Jake paced the room, muttering to himself. "We're trapped. There's no way out. They're going to pick us off one by one." The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. The windows were darkened, the doors creaking ominously with every breeze. The whispers had returned, growing louder and more insistent, echoing our deepest fears and insecurities. I tried to reach out for help, but the cell phones were dead, and the landline produced only static. We were cut off, isolated in this cursed town with no way to escape. The malevolent forces had us right where they wanted us. Days blurred together in a haze of fear and sleepless nights. Katie buried herself in the journal, desperately searching for another way to fight back. Jake's paranoia grew more intense, his eyes darting to every shadow, convinced that the spirits were closing in. And me, I felt my grip on reality slipping, haunted by visions of Sam's terrified face and the malevolent figure's burning eyes. Then, in the midst of our despair, Katie found something. "Listen to this," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. "The journal mentions a hidden chapel beneath the town hall. It was a place of worship for the settlers before they turned to dark rituals. There's a passage here that suggests it might hold the key to reversing the curse." Jake scoffed. "Another wild goose chase? How do we know it's not just another trap?" But Katie's eyes were fierce with determination. "We don't have a choice. It's our only lead." As we prepared to venture to the town hall, the full truth of Hollow's End began to unfold. The journal hinted at something far darker than we had imagined, a malevolent force that was not just summoned by the settlers, but had been part of the town's fabric since its founding. The spirits were not merely protectors gone rogue. They were the very essence of Hollow's End, feeding off the fear and suffering of its inhabitants. And in a chilling twist, we realized our own connection to this nightmare. Each of our families had ties to the town's dark past, a legacy of guilt and complicity that had drawn us here. The malevolent forces had been waiting for us, knowing we would return to the place where our ancestors had made their fateful pact. As we descended into the depths of the town hall, the lines between reality and nightmare blurred. The chapel awaited us, and with it, the final confrontation with the malevolent forces that sought to consume us. Our sanity hung by a thread, and the true horror of Hollow's End was only beginning to reveal itself. Chapter 7: The Final Stand. The town hall loomed ahead, its silhouette a dark blot against the moonlit sky. We approached it with a grim resolve, each step echoing the finality of our mission. The hidden chapel beneath the hall was our last hope, and we had to face the malevolent forces that had tormented us for so long. Katie led the way, clutching the journal tightly. The ancient book had provided us with the final clues we needed, a set of instructions for a ritual that could potentially banish the spirits for good. Jake, his face set in a determined scowl, carried a bundle of salt and iron relics items, we hoped would help us in our fight. I was left with a mix of dread and fierce resolve, my mind racing with the knowledge that this was our last chance. We descended into the chapel, the air growing colder with each step. Passage was narrow, lined with crumbling stone walls and flickering torchlight that cast eerie shadows. The chapel itself was an unsettling place, a vast underground cavern with an altar at its center, surrounded by faded, cryptic symbols. "This is it," Katie said, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "We need to perform the ritual here, right on the altar." As the clock struck midnight, the chapel seemed to come alive. The shadows writhed and twisted, coalescing into the forms of the malevolent spirits we had come to fear. They surrounded us, their ghostly forms glowing with an otherworldly light. Jake threw salt in a desperate attempt to keep the spirits at bay, but the force of their rage was overwhelming. The chapel shook, the ground vibrating as the spirits roared with fury. The air crackled with a sinister energy, and the oppressive fear clawed at our sanity. Katie began the incantation from the journal, her voice rising above the cacophony. As she chanted, I could see the spirits faltering, their forms flickering and wavering. The battle was both physical and psychological. The spirits attacked us with visions of our deepest fears and regrets, each more terrifying than the last. I faced my own demons as I fought back, grappling with the ghosts of my past mistakes and failures. I had to confront the part of me that had always felt unworthy, the fear that had driven me to seek answers in the first place. As I faced these fears, I felt a surge of strength, a resolve that pushed me forward. Jake, too, battled his own inner turmoil. His family's dark legacy weighed heavily on him, but as he fought off the spirits, he found clarity in his actions. He realized that he could not change the past, but he could fight for a future free from the shadows that had haunted his ancestors. With a final, triumphant cry, Katie completed the incantation. The amulet, now glowing with a fierce light, resonated with the chant, and the spirits began to dissolve, their cries of rage turning into anguished howls that faded into silence. The chapel shook one last time before falling into a profound quiet. We stood in the aftermath, exhausted and battered but victorious. The malevolent forces had been banished, their grip on Hollow's End finally broken. We had faced our fears, confronted our personal demons, and emerged on the other side. Hollow's End was no longer a place of darkness, but a town with a chance to heal and rebuild. As we emerged from the chapel into the dawn light, the town seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The oppressive weight lifted. We had survived the final stand, and the nightmare was finally over. Chapter 8: Aftermath and Reflection. The dawn crept over Hollow's End, casting golden hue over the town that had been shrouded in darkness for so long. The oppressive weight that had hung over us for weeks seemed to lift as the first rays of sunlight touched the earth. We emerged from the chapel, weary and battered but victorious. The air was fresh and new, as if the town itself was taking its first breath of freedom. Katie and Jake were the first to speak. "We did it," Katie said, her voice filled with both relief and exhaustion. "The spirits are gone." Jake nodded, his face a mixture of weariness and newfound resolve. "But at a cost. We lost Sam, and the trauma. It's going to stay with us." We stood together in silence, the enormity of what we had endured sinking in. Town was eerily quiet, its usual sounds of life absent. The residents who had once been so elusive now seemed to be moving about with a newfound freedom, their faces marked by a mixture of relief and wariness. Katie and I worked to clean up the chapel and bury the remains of the ancient altar. It felt like a ritual of closure, a way to put the past to rest. Jake, despite his evident fatigue, helped with a determined spirit, trying to process the weight of the events and the heavy legacy that had been lifted from his shoulders. The days following our final confrontation were filled with a somber routine. We made arrangements for Sam's remains to be returned home, his sacrifice a poignant reminder of the cost of our victory. Katie returned to her research, hoping to find a way to help the town heal, while Jake took up the task of documenting our experiences, hoping to shed light on the dark history of Hollow's End. But as the town slowly began to rebuild, a lingering sense of unease remained. The air was still thick with the remnants of the malevolent forces that had once held it in their grip. We tried to move on, to find some semblance of normalcy, but the shadows seemed to linger. One evening, as I walked through the cemetery, I noticed something unsettling. A fresh, unevenly disturbed patch of earth near one of the older graves. The ground seemed to shift and tremble slightly underfoot. I brushed it off as a trick of the light, but a chill ran down my spine. As I turned to leave, I saw a group of new arrivals making their way into town, a family, looking bewildered but determined. Their faces were a mirror of the expressions we had worn weeks ago. I tried to warn them, to tell them of the horrors we had faced, but the words caught in my throat. Hollow's End had been a place of nightmares, and the curse seemed to have an insidious way of drawing in the unsuspecting. As the sun set, the shadows deepened, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the malevolent forces were not entirely gone. The town was at peace for now, but the darkness had a way of creeping back, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. The curse of Hollow's End had been banished for the moment, but its legacy would linger, a haunting reminder of the darkness that could return.